welcome to FinextraTV. I'm Madhvi Sonia and we're here at the Communify Intelligence Experience. Joining me today is Jeff Harvey, Executive Director of Operations at Deep Blue. Hi Jeff.
Hi,
Thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you for joining us. So today we're going to be talking about threats to the investment industry. How is technology hindering the investment industry today?
I think the challenge there is legacy tech. It's not advancing as swiftly as the investor needs it to be. So investors today have a keen interest in their entire portfolio, whether that be their fixed assets or their invested assets or their deposit assets. Having all of those assets in one place is a real challenge, and what we'll talk about, I'm sure, in a few moments is the immobility of data. But when it comes to the legacy tech, there are challenges with harmonizing all of that disparate information into a classification schema, right? So it's normalized when it comes out the backside. Also, getting the information and generating what's a reasonable and consumable performance on that data, right? So an investor doesn't necessarily just want to know what their performance is on their invested assets. What is the performance of my entire portfolio? How am I allocating my assets? You know, we're not a financial planning organization, so while we do agree that how an individual spends versus how they saves is very relevant, for us, you know, we do public finance, so cash management for local government entities. So their needs are a little bit different, if you will, when it comes to how we're working with them. But the same challenges exist for the local government entity clients that we have, or the retail investor, or the large institutional investor, or the high net worth client, et cetera, is the technology is just not advancing. And so what happens is portfolio accounting systems, performance engines, et cetera, just aren't coming along as swiftly, right? So they have to build band-aids on top of themselves for quality control challenges. And what you end up doing is buying additional technology to sit on top of that, right? And then you get into the mobility of data. We have to ship it from here to put it over here to harmonize it there and so on. So I think that's the biggest threat, is that some of the vendors in the space are at the curve or ahead of the curve, but the underlying dependent systems are way behind the curve.
And touching on the immobility of data, as you mentioned, what are some of the solutions to that problem?
Well, I think what's interesting is you'll find is it's very common, and this issue was solved a long time ago. There are data aggregators that aggregate data from custodians. So what are my holdings, what are my transactions, et cetera. So custodians, they're at the curve, I would say, with the data aggregators and getting that information into your accounting systems, your performance engines, and whatnot, right? But the other data, right? A client has deposits at a savings account or a high yield savings account or a checking account. Well, that's part of their portfolio, right? How do we get that data into the performance engine, right? So you start looking at different vendors out there to do aggregation for that. You look at Plaid, Global, all these different utilities. None of them have everybody, right? So then you find yourself, okay, now I need to get physical statements or an email of a PDF. And then you have to have somebody, a human, read that statement, extract the data, type the data, copy and paste the data, and all we're talking about is fail point, fail point, fail point. The opportunity for error, and not only that, the inefficiency. We have requirements to our clients to deliver accurate, timely information based upon a service level agreement. And all of these chinks in the chain, if you will, they create bottlenecks, both in the term of timing, but as well as the accuracy, right? So now we have to add a human layer on top of that for quality control. So what we need, right, is we need technology vendors to be mindful of our challenges, right, and come to us with those solutions.
You've talked so much about all the inefficiencies in this process. In an ideal world, how will technology be leveraged in the next year to perhaps bring some solutions to the fore?
Well, I think what's really interesting is I just sitting here at the Communify conference is I just learned some really cool technology that they have using AI, right? And now it's understandable in the investment world, certainly with all the SROs out there, how we have to be careful about how we utilize AI. We're not going to be using it in our advice, right? Our advice is our skill and expertise in our advisors, right? Our portfolio managers. But what AI can do is create efficiencies in making that data mobile, right? So currently for statements, for example, we use technology called robotic process automation, which is still a huge level up from where we were just a year or two ago. But that technology still requires that an individual loads a statement calling it the exact same thing every single month with no spaces, no extra numbers. But the technology I just saw that Communify is going to bring to the forefront is AI is going to have the ability to read those statements that a client can load privately and securely directly to a portal, read that statement, extrapolate the data, and then give us still a human being, a maker, checker, approver opportunity where it'll show us the data point, it'll show us where that data point came from, and we have the opportunity to approve it and load the data or reject it and have it rerun. That alone, even though we're talking about getting data off of a statement, that's a tremendous amount of efficiency. There's quality control involved in it, and it removes a bottleneck. And then, in the end, the more efficient we are, the more timely and accurate information gets out to our clients, and the more timely and efficient they can then report to who they have to report to. You think about the retail investor. The retail investor doesn't necessarily have somebody else that they have to share that information with, maybe their spouse, maybe their financial advisor, but you assume that their advisor is doing that work on their behalf, maybe their CPA. But when you're talking about an institutional investor, or you're talking about our clients, they have constituents, they have somebody that they need to report to, right? So if we're delayed, they're delayed. If we can create efficiencies in getting the data out, we can help create efficiencies for how they can then recapture the data from our reports in a digital manner so they can have more efficiencies on their side. Again, everybody wins. So what we need is the vendors to be cognizant of our challenges and continue to bring solutions like that it's not about replacing the human being, it's elevating the human being to focus on something that's more valuable, a more value add, as opposed to just doing a redundant task, if you will. And I think Communify is bringing this technology to the forefront. I just saw a wonderful amount of utility that we're really excited about in the future.
It's all so great, and we've talked about efficiencies, but then in the future they'll turn into opportunities. Thank you so much, Jeff, for joining us. Hope you have a lovely rest of the conference.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.